So tags and categorization in the POM. So this is something that we want to add to make something like CodeZoom or java-source.net so that people can add. We want to make some standard categories for projects. That might be something similar to what SourceForge uses, standard categorization for testing tools or it's a database tool. But we also want to allow people to do tagging like they do with Delicious. So that if any project wants to start tagging their projects, they can. And we're hoping that over time, if we find tags that are common, we'll just convert those into standard categories.
This will be the app in the repository manager, the collaborative tab?
Yes. Specification dependencies. So this is something more that works like OSGI does. So an OSGI bundle or a dependency will actually state what it requires to work, but it doesn't actually state where it comes from. OSGI containers don't have any notion of where a repository, where a dependency comes from. So if an OSGI bundle simply says it wants to use javax.servlet, the OSGI container will satisfy that requirement, finding any implementer. It doesn't matter where it comes from. So we're going to be doing something similar for Maven 2.1. So you will say that you want to use javax.servlet, and you might get the Geronimo jar, or you might get the one that Glassfish makes. So the one addendum that we have to that is that you can actually still specify the provider if you want. So you could have a preference for the Geronimo implementation or the Glassfish implementation. Custom components. This comes back to some of the things that we've done for eTrade. So the standard dependency resolver in Maven uses POMs and uses all the Java notions. But for eTrade, we actually have a dependency resolver that uses the RPM database. But we had to jump through some hoops to actually make that work, and we actually want to try and make that a lot easier for people to write their own custom implementations. Again, one of the problems with the PDE people trying to build the Eclipse stuff with Maven is that it was too hard for them to actually create a project builder that would use OSGI manifest information. So we're trying to make custom components easier to make. By and large, almost nobody will have to do this, but for very specific cases or moving to new platforms, it's almost always necessary. So any of the .NET stuff we've done, people have had to make new components and have their own sort of custom hybrids in Maven, which we don't want to be floating around or existing very long. We have our own version for doing RPMs. And if this is to work at all for Eclipse, for the PDE project, for them to actually use Maven to build their stuff, then we have to make this easier. Some dependency extensions. The first simple one, actually I can't remember the other two, but exclude all. This generally comes into play when projects like Spring don't specify dependencies as being optional. So the Spring core jar might require every JDBC driver, every WebView tool, every persistence tool. So all of those get dragged in by default because the Spring POMs, before Carlos fixed them, weren't marking those as optional. So typically, in a POM, something like Spring, you would say that the persistence layers were optional, and you as the user would then say, I want to use that persistence layer. But for POMs that are not set up properly and even effective, they don't have optional dependencies set up correctly, it's been causing and wreaking havoc in people trying to build with things like Hibernate and Spring. So we're adding a few more dependency extensions to try and make that easier, so that if you specify Spring as a dependency, you can by default get it to exclude all of the dependencies, and you would selectively pick which ones you want. It's sort of it's a compromise. It's not something we wanted to do, but it was causing so many problems that we had to add that. We're trying to push for people making correct POMs and correct metadata for all the projects, but there are just some cases where projects don't cooperate. There's not much we can do except trying to provide users extensions like exclude all to try and make their builds manageable. Sustained connections for transfers. Right now, if anybody does a lot of releases or deployments with Maven using SSH or WebDAV, it can be incredibly slow. Something with 10 modules can sometimes take on the order of 30 minutes to deploy with WebDAV, just because we're not pooling connections or reusing connections for each artifact push. So that's currently working now with Wagon, and that's fully functional, and we're integrating into Maven 2.1. orders of magnitude faster. Better parent versioning. Anybody who has lots of modules where they don't specify the version of the parent in each one of the modules, we're trying to get releases, or trying to maintain them, or moving up versions is very tedious. So we'll have a way in Maven 2.1 where you don't have to specify the version of the parent, and it will be inherited properly. A greatly improved embedder. Anybody who's using any of the IDE integration for Eclipse uses the embedder for Maven 2, and there are now plugins for IntelliJ, and the NetBeans plugin, which is probably actually the best of the three, uses the embedder, and it's actually got a lot of attention lately, and it will be greatly improved for people who are trying to integrate the embedder. Some of the things that have been fixed are for the embedder to actually pull down artifacts and manage repositories. The Geronimo project actually uses a Maven repository inside the Geronimo app server, and that's how they actually store all their modules and plugins and everything they use for Geronimo uses a Maven infrastructure underneath. So they actually use the embedder to actually grab plugins from a repository. So they have a console in the next version of Geronimo that can list all the plugins that are available. Right now they have to hard code what plugins are available because they're waiting for the repository manager to work to find them. But they have a simple console, and people can select which plugins they want, and it uses the embedder underneath to go grab all the plugins from a Maven repository and install them for the user. So these are some of the things we're changing in the embedder. There's Geronimo, and Glassfish actually wants to do the same thing as well. Java 5 annotations for plugins. So a lot of people have tried using normal standard Java annotations for Java 5 plugins, and notice it doesn't work very well. So that will be fixed for Maven 2.1 as well. And even though we do have scriptable components right now, how many people use Maven 2? And does anybody actually use any of the scriptable components? The only ones that really work are Bean Shell. So we're actually going to try and promote the scriptable plugins. So you'll actually be able to write plugins in, actually the Groovy one works, and the JRuby one actually works really well. There's a fellow named Eric Redmond who's actually been working on it nonstop. He uses JRuby plugins and logos for everything. So that's a short list of the features that are coming in Maven 2.1.